Hi guys, it's Will here and welcome to another episode of the Upgraded Ape Show. On this show we have Dr Koberda and we have a fascinating discussion of how he maps brains and then upgrades them. He dives into how he can physically see the brain working, how using a current over your forehead can halve the time it takes to learn things, and then how using neurofeedback we can physically change the brain structure for the better. So, without further ado, let's jump straight into the show. Hi guys, it's Will here and welcome to the Upgraded Ape Show. Upgrade your brain, get more done, kick life's ass. Hi, Dr Koberda, and welcome to the Upgraded Ape Show.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
No worries, you're welcome. I'm super keen, as we're just talking pre-show, to dive into a whole bunch of questions from neuropsychiatry to some of the machinery and technology that you're using to do your work. But can you give us just a quick introduction to what you do and how you're improving people's brains?
Well, I'm by training, I'm a neurologist and I was trained, I'm originally from Poland, but most of my training, subspecialized training was in UAS. I came to this country 25 years ago, close to that. Before I worked for some German and Italian universities, and actually I was trained in specifically in neurology at Oregon Health Science Universities in Portland, Oregon. And after that, I think that was a good time when I did my training because. After that time, it became really increasing neuroscience development noted with a lot of breakthrough developments. One of those which I would consider as really crucial was development of magnetic resonance imaging technology, especially functional imaging. As well as other computerized techniques, including the one which I'm working with, which is called quantitative EEG or brain mapping. So what I'm mostly interested in, I'm interested in working with folks who either tried multiple therapies, conventional therapies, including medications, and did not get better, or those who prefer not to use medications and would like to go straight to what we call neuromodulation techniques, which neurofeedback and transcranial magnetic stimulation are included. So what we really do, I see in my practice two types of patients. One type of patient are those what we call neurologically or psychiatry terms, having problems with functioning. They are unable to function either in the family environment or at work environment. So they are really sick people from that point that they need help. And we try to address their problems, either depression or anxiety. Some patients could be having anxiety so extended so they cannot even leave their homes despite the fact that they have education and should be able to be employed and be successful in life. The second part of my practice is a group of patients who are interested what we call in enhancement of their brain. So they may be pretty decently functioning in the environment, but they would like to improve their functioning. So we actually have a group of pilots, commercial pilots working for different American airlines who would like to extend their professional activities. The American aviation industry, they recently extended the retirement age for pilots from age 60 to age 65. As you may know, many memory problems and neurodegenerative problems, which manifest as the forgetfulness or problems with attention, may be manifesting at that age. So they are interested in extending their professional activities, and they are very much enthusiastic if they can find a place where we can enhance their brain, that they can perform better. Another group of patients, actually not a patient, it's more even what is now called peak performance, is you may have some athletes who are interested in competing with the other professionals, and now the world is so competitive. So let's say if you look at the sprinters, if you run 100 meters and it's really less than a second needed to beat another competitor. It's just a fraction of a second. So if you can improve concentration and reduce anxiety, that someone would be faster than the other fellow, that's really something that they are interested to improve.
That sounds so fascinating and interesting. There's so much to go at from what you just said. I think first off, we should talk about the technologies themselves. So you mentioned brain mapping, neurofeedback, transcranial stimulation. Can you just talk a little bit about those three and what they're actually used for specifically?
Yes, well, the brain mapping history of that really started 30 or even 40 years ago, but because computers technology was just beginning, there was very experimental initially, but at the current times when the computers are so advanced and relatively inexpensive, and programming really accelerated, this technology is becoming really forefront of neuroscience, and combination of these techniques frequently also is advantageous in evaluating different conditions. As you may know, many specialties like psychiatry for many years, they never were involved in any brain imaging. They were treating the patients based on the symptoms, prescribing medications, and it was very unusual for psychiatrists to request any type of brain imaging. I think now everything is changing because those technologies are becoming available, and insurances also are covering many of those technologies. So my interest is mostly with brain mapping, quantitative EEG, which is also called electrical imaging. And what this type of imaging differs from, let's say the magnetic resonance imaging, is that this is a functional imaging. Magnetic resonance imaging and computerized tomography mostly show the structure. But frequently you can see the patient who has completely normal structure of the brain on those imaging modalities. However, they don't function well. They may have behavioral problems, they may have memory issues and information processing difficulties. So that's where this functional imaging have a place. And electrical imaging, brain mapping, is very inexpensive. So you can use really laptop and software and amplifier for EEG, and use that for creating those maps. You can do it in the office. The patient don't have to go to the hospital, so big imaging centers. And also they are very easy generated. You don't need to inject the patients with any radioactive tracers. So there is a lot of advantages to that. So we mostly use those brain maps for diagnostic purposes. In my office, I see the patients first. We have interview. We usually speak for 1 hour about the problems which are concerning the particular individual. And the next step, if they have any cognitive memory issues, we do computerized memory testing, cognitive testing, which are able to compare cognitive function of a particular patient to normal individuals who have the same age and education. So then we can see which part of the brain is weak, which part of the brain is not functioning well, and we can see what we can do. Of course, those patients who have history of any head injury or possibility they may have a brain problem, structural problem, we also request imaging like magnetic resonance imaging, but that could be done in addition. So that's for diagnostic purposes.
Let me jump just in there for a second.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Something I find super fascinating is the links or non-links between your brain structure being fine, but there's still perhaps being an issue with, I can't think of a better way to put it other than the software within the brain. And then the opposite of, I've seen case studies where people will be missing parts of the brain, but they'll be functioning just fine. That link between the two, is that something that's obvious and easy to see through these scans?
Well, what is amazing is really that you can see exactly a correlation of the patient's symptoms with location in the brain. So Dr. Brodmann, I believe he was a German neurologist approximately 100 years ago. He described different areas of the brain and different locations, identify different locations and assign the numbers called Brodmann areas. And so let's say if you have a patient with depression, and they come for evaluation and they say, well, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, and so on, and you do the brain maps, you can actually see the frontal lobe dysfunction. You can do magnetic resonance imaging on those patients and it will be completely normal. However, when you do this quantitative EEG brain maps, electrical type of imaging, you can see that there is exactly electrical dysfunction of the brain in the location which is responsible for those symptoms, because we know that the frontal lobes location are involved in depression. So that's something beautiful that we were not able to do before, which is now possible.
That's absolutely fascinating. So once you've got that base kind of level and you've got something to work on, how do things like neurofeedback and transcranial stimulation come into play?
I like to first explain a little bit about those techniques. We call them neuromodulation. It's a general term because we bypass digestive tract. We don't, like if you take medications, they have to go through the kidneys or liver, and so we bypass that. We don't have to. We go almost directly to the brain. It's just the skull, which is and some skin on the skull, which is separating the equipment from the brain. So the advantage is that those techniques they are could be divided into what we call neuroregulation, which neurofeedback is a part of neuroregulation because we don't deliver any energy. We just self-regulate those places of the brain and hope that if this electrical dysregulation would be corrected, that the patient functions and symptoms will resolve. And that's was the case in most of the patients being treated in neurofeedback clinic is. The transcranial magnetic stimulation and also direct transcranial current stimulation are the techniques which do deliver a sort of energy to the brain. And so they are not only self-regulatory, but also do deliver energy. And we actually use both techniques in our office. I usually start with a neurofeedback because it's less invasive, and patients, most of the patients, I would say about 70-75% do respond to neurofeedback very well within 10 sessions. And so we usually start with that. And then when needed, if the patient doesn't respond or responds not enough, we may put additional device like transcranial magnetic stimulation in addition to neurofeedback therapy. So how does it work? Neurofeedback, actually, I think you had already on your in your program one of the neurofeedback fellows. And most of the neurofeedback devices, they still use only one or two sensors. So neurofeedback, what we are using in my office is based on 19 sensors, active electrodes. And we use the CAP system. And what's advantage of this system is that it can create three-dimensional maps, electrical maps. And many structures in the brain are in deeper location. So advantage of three-dimensional maps is that you can see areas of the brain which are having electrical dysregulation, which may not be seen with the surface testing, only when you use one or two electrodes. Example is insular cortex, which frequently is dysregulated in the pain syndromes. Also, cingulate cortex is also hidden, so it may not be seen with surface techniques. And as we know, the electrical energy is so important. Most of the cardiologists use EKG systems, which everybody is familiar with, which really what it does, it checks the electrical signal from the heart. And of course, we can see if the heart rate is irregular, or if there is problem with not enough oxygen based on characteristic of that signal.
So with neurofeedback, am I right in thinking you're giving the brain an opportunity to look back in on itself, which it can't do normally? Does it suss out what is not working as well as it should be through that feedback, or is there another way to manipulate what you need to change?
Well, I compare it a little bit to autopilot. Most of us who have no neuropsychiatric problems, we function in the autopilot mode. So until something happens, everything is great. But what neurofeedback is like a switching from autopilot to manual mode. Then, of course, we need a little bit more sophisticated equipment, and that's what the EEG electrodes and sensor are used for, that we can then monitor the brain, identify where is the dysfunction of the brain, and use the neurofeedback to fix that. So we switch the patient from auto mode to manual mode, fix the problem, and once the problem is fixed, frequently patient doesn't need additional sessions of neurofeedback as far as the reason of the dysfunction is removed, because as we know, a lot of causes of let's say anxiety or depression may be the environment, which sometimes we don't have complete control of. Let's say I can use the example, if you have patient who have anxiety and because of the domestic abuse, the abusive husband or something like that, you can use neurofeedback and correct anxiety and depression for a few weeks. But if the patient comes back to the same environment when the abusive husband continues the same behavior, this patient will have symptoms back and will end up in our office again.
Sure. So you can't just use it. It's not a plaster to put over the problem. You've got to use it to discover the problem, and then you solve the problem along the line.
Yes, very similar is with children with autistic children, and sometimes children with attention deficit hyperactive disorder. You can definitely improve the symptoms using the neurofeedback, but we know already that in our environment, especially what we eat, is very important for the brain and the body for the performance. So if the children will be fed with junk food, with sodas, and different type of food which will make them hyperactive, and that was scientifically proven, then the symptoms will be persisting and will be coming back, even if neurofeedback will give them relief of the symptoms for a period of months or two.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we'll come back onto diet and food in a minute because I think that's something worth exploring further. But let's touch on transcranial direct stimulation because this has been in and out of the media quite a lot over the past couple of years. I mean, the first time I saw it was that the Army or the Air Force came out saying that they trained drone pilots with this technology, and that the drone pilots were learning twice as fast, or they were condensing the amount of time of their training plan into half. Is this technology come from the military side, or has this been used in medicine for longer? Where is the origins of it, and how is it used today?
Well, transcranial electric direct stimulation is still experimental technique. However, it's very promising and is very inexpensive. You can presumably construct the device for testing for $500 or less. And of course, once the companies start to manufacture that, the price will be 10 times higher because what they call medical, which is becoming more expensive. That's what business medicine is about, I guess, to some degree. But it's really inexpensive, very simple, and really it's amazing how so simple technology could be giving such amazing brain enhancement abilities. Very similar studies were done, I think, in people who were trading and gaming using the computers, and I think even randomized studies, if I remember, when there were people, randomly chosen to different groups, and it showed that those who were subjected to this direct current stimulation were doing much better, making faster and better decisions than those who didn't. So it's really amazing, and of course, in current ages, with all the wars happening around our globe, every technology is picked up easily by military, and applications in military field are easily found. So many technologies, especially brain and computer interface, which is technology of different computer devices interacting with the brain, are becoming point of interest for military. So that's what is happening. Definitely, I agree with you.
For sure. So how does it work, both on a physical perspective of where is the current going and what's it doing, and why does that improve performance?
Well, this is a good question, and of course, when you stimulate the brain with different modalities, either transcranial magnetic stimulation or electric stimulation, that usually leads to activation of the different networks. We know currently that everything is more complex than we were thinking before. Usually, this is not one structure in the brain which is responsible for the function. It seems that most of the functions are relying on networks, on many connections in the brain and many centers in the brain. And by stimulating one of those locations, usually the frontal locations are stimulated with those technologies. They definitely must have involve release of different neurotransmitters, which activate the brain and transduct the function and improve our performance.
The current is given a direct kind of physical change to the brain through neurotransmitters and different chemicals.
Yes.
Cool. Well, that pulls me nice onto the next question. Do you work with any supplements, nootropics, or as we talked about, food and diet with your perhaps not with your patients? I don't know what you can say and talk about them, but with the athletes and the high performers that you deal with, are there any again nootropic supplements or food or dietary changes that you suggest to them to improve their mental game?
Well, I think the most important is to avoid the food which is not good for you. So I think it's very important to talk to the individual who is seen in the office, about what they eat, and focus mostly on the organic food and avoiding any food which you can buy in the stores, which has expiration date next year. Because it's a lot of conservants and bad components which are not good for your body. But what I do actually, I collaborate. My office collaborates with several other professionals who specialize in other techniques. So I have a Chinese doctor who is MD from China and PhD from Oxford in England, and she also has very advanced training in acupuncture and diet recommendations. So she collaborates with me, and we have very often mutual patients. So also, other collaborations are very beneficial. So I think it's very difficult to have knowledge of all the specialties. So I think having right collaborations may be the good way to practice.
Okay, perfect. Should we dive into a couple of quick fire questions?
Definitely, whatever you would like to.
First question, what part of the day are you most productive?
Well, naturally, because the sleep is giving us rest and regeneration of the body. Naturally, the first part of the day seems to be the best for peak performance. So I recommend everyone to do most of the stuff in the morning, because naturally in the evening everybody is tired. So I do not recommend doing anything at night. It's very important also to go to sleep not later than 10 or 11 at night, because the first part of the sleep is really very important. So I really think most of the activities should be done in the morning.
Awesome. If you could recommend one book to help people learn even more about the brain or how they can improve the brain's performance, what would it be?
I have actually two books which I like to recommend. One of the book is called Symphony in the Brain, which is written by Jim Robbins. And this is a really book which was describing history of neurofeedback and related techniques, and has been written by the journalist who is very familiar with neuroscience, and is also very inexpensive. Another book which I lately read, and which I was very much impressed, was a book. I believe he's a Canadian doctor, Dr. Norman Dodge. And the name of the book is The Brain That Changes Itself. And describes really a lot of fascinating stories. With neurofeedbacks, also, if someone is interested in reading the book, which is written by Australian author Martin Brink, The Migraine Revolution, is a very good book, which is written with humor and a lot of fascinating illustrations, which is addressed mostly for general public, sophisticated public, which explains a lot of technology that we discuss, including Loretta neurofeedback very well. So those books I definitely would recommend to order.
Awesome. I'll link to all those in the show notes as well, so everyone listening can check them out. One last question. What is one thing that you're grateful for today?
Well, I'm always grateful. My parents were from Poland, and my father was a psychiatrist. My mom also was in medical field, but they were involved in the Second War. So I think for me, always the most important was to be in the peace. And especially now with all those turmoil around the world, I always enjoy every day when there is peace around me. I know it's not around every country, but I pray for all those countries to have peace and not be involved in atrocities. And of course, beautiful weather around helps. So I really feel great if I feel healthy and I can work and do what I like. I think that's the most important.
Great answer. Well, just on that, I think a lot of people take for granted. So I'm obviously in the UK, that how peaceful it is, and that's a great point to kind of reflect on, I guess.
Thank you.
I've got one final question for you, which we ask everyone who comes on the Upgraded Ape Show. Upgraded Ape listeners are keen to upgrade their brains so they can get more done, so they can get more out of life. If you could go back in time, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give your younger self to help move yourself along further, quicker?
Well, I think when I look, I'm in early 50s, so I think the education is really important. And young people, I see that in the United States they frequently postpone education. They think they can do it later, and the time is running out frequently. So I would say that when I look from my perspective, it's very important to focus on what you like, what you enjoy most, and get the highest education that you can achieve, and then enjoy your profession and have the benefits of that education, because it will pay off in the future.
Cool. Great stuff. Well, Dr. Koberda, thank you very much for coming on the show. Can you give our audience a link to where they can find out more about you and perhaps more about the Neurobalance Center?
Definitely. So my website is www.tallahasseeneurobalanceCenter.com. And I actually placed a lot of articles in publication sections, and including article from University of Montreal, which really explains why neurofeedback is so beneficial, because it creates the new neurons, new structures, and new connections. It's a randomized study, so everybody could go to the website and check this paper as well, because I think it's really fascinating and explains a lot of neuroscientific findings in neurofeedback.
Awesome. Well, we'll link to that. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you.